This is House Planning Help episode 127. Hello, I'm Ben Adam Smith, and this is the podcast for you if you're interested in self-build, because I'm exploring what houses we should be building in the 21st century and trying to break down the major roadblocks that may get in our way. Alongside this, my personal goal's still there, although it's looking tough to reach because I wanted to create an energy-efficient home before I turn 40 this coming August. Today, we've got a solo session for you, and I'm going to be looking at 5 ways to get proactive when looking for land, because I've been looking for land very nearly 2 years now. I can't believe it. And then 2 years before that, I was researching what I wanted to build. It just seems incredible how the time can go by. I'm sure there were better ways that I could have been approaching all of this and maybe being more proactive than I have up until now. If you're like me, you probably have a busy life, and it's just amazing when you've got a family as well. The time just disappears. It's the one thing you'd love to buy more of. So in that 2 years, I've put in 3 offers, and to me that shows that there is land out there. It's not saying it comes by that regularly. Of course, there are other plots and opportunities that I've looked away from and thought, these aren't right for me. Generally, I've used estate agents. I would say my favourite thing is actually doing it all online. Rightmove is the number one thing I enjoy doing. And I think because you can refine the search so well on there, and they've just thought of everything, whether it's schools that you're interested in or the price range or the property type. They've just got a really good system there. You can go on Street View and see, this looks interesting. The trouble is that I think this is probably the most popular way of looking for properties and land as it stands. Also, some of the specific websites like Plot Search and Plot Find are dedicated to finding land. And in certain geographic areas, it's going to be easy for you. I'm not in one of those, and I imagine a lot of people aren't. So it's either you are in a place that it's easy to find land and you'll probably hate these episodes that I'm doing, or it's the flip side that you just think, oh my God, this is so difficult. Of those 3 opportunities, the first time we could have got that one really easily, but I just thought everything was too expensive. I just should have gone for it. Didn't realise what a great opportunity that was at the time, and there weren't too many other people. Whereas the ones that I've looked at more recently, there's been a fight for them. I think one had very nearly, was it 15 or 20 people? I can't even remember. And it went way over the asking price. But they always seem to go to blind or sealed bids, which I'm slightly suspicious about. That works for them, for the estate agents and the people selling the land, not great for everyone else. So at least if you did know what it was going up to, you could think, well, could I put in more money? But they just don't seem to work like that. I think there are all sorts of different ways you can do it. Auction is the other one that we want to do a podcast on that at some time. So for me, what I want to do today is to look at 5 ways to get proactive when looking for land. And this is partly to tell myself I need to be doing these. I need to be investing time in making sure that I'm just trying as hard as I possibly can. Before I start those, my top tip, which might have meant that I had a house that I was living in now that I've completed and I was there already, would be flexibility. Because with flexibility, you can just widen your search and think, well, actually, I could go and live anywhere. Of course, it's not for everyone. Sometimes you've got a job that keeps you in a certain place, or in my situation, I don't have that in terms of I have an internet business. That's great. However, my wife is very attached to where we live. I like where we live, but I think I'd be slightly more flexible and will be prepared to try other avenues, maybe moving closer towards my parents, or just anyway, I would like to try some other areas. And I think that that's one of the things that's happened gradually over time, is my wife has realised that if we keep that search so close to where we're living at the moment, which is already, I think it's the most expensive county in the UK to be looking for land outside London. I think London is far worse. And then I think she's softened over time to the idea of we're going to have to consider some other opportunities. And the good side of that is that actually the second you start moving further north, the prices go down quite considerably. And there are a couple of areas that I like. So we're going to keep down the looking on Rightmove, flicking through, do we like this? But let's have a look at the proactive ways. Oh, I know. I want to tell you one story beforehand just to sort of illustrate how easy it could be if you're prepared to go anywhere. My friends Mike and Lizzie, who already have a great house to live in, they've just been on a trip to the Isle of Skye and were so tempted to start another self-build there because obviously it's just a beautiful place out there, and we were just having a nose, having a look at what could we get around here. And when you start thinking, well, actually I can get a plot for £70,000, and that's not a rubbish one, that's one with a magnificent view across the bay and so forth. So it just shows that with that flexibility, this land thing just melts away. Let's get proactive, shall we? The first one is to spread the word. And we've actually done a whole episode on local knowledge, which is tied into this, but I don't think entirely. So episode 122, if you haven't heard that, is on local knowledge. But spreading that message to friends and family, a very, very easy first step. Perhaps you're surrounded by them as well. They can do some work for you. Just so the first thing when they see you, they ask, so how's your self-build project going? If they can't help you immediately, they just know about it and perhaps can put the feelers out. Because there's no doubt that if you can get to multiple lots of people, you just unearth those opportunities that will not have you in a position where you're going to be in competition with others. You really want to try and avoid that. Perhaps it's a friend's large garden. If you're within a town boundary, it does seem, I've said this before, I hate the idea of losing all these gardens, but that does actually seem what the government and what the local authorities, the way that they're going to go down. They don't want to build on the fields surrounding the towns and villages, so just build up in the towns and villages. Fair enough, I understand that. Social media, don't underestimate that as well. Hashtags, really useful, getting the message out there. We've talked in that episode on local knowledge about seeking out the connectors, and I do feel that these people are special just because their networks are so deep and they really do know people. Builders, architects, I tried that one as well and wasn't too sure, but I think it probably could work. Very early on in the land search, there was a local architect who was looking to build himself a house and thought that he might have a double plot, and that was an opportunity for me for a while. I thought that that was going to work out really well. So it just shows that that could be something. It's worth a go. All of these things, they're going to take time, but they're worth a go. So number one, spread the word. Number two, I've called leaflet drops. And that is, again, taking it into your own hands. And I think I mentioned this on a podcast a little while back that Dean Scott, who's one of the hub members here at House Planning Help, he showed us what he did, and this inspired me to think, right, we're going to do that. So my wife has been on Upwork, which is somewhere where you can put on some text and give them some images and says, can you design me a flyer? And for $20, we've got our flyer back. We're ready to print now. I'm not sure what print and delivery will cost, but I was thinking a worst case scenario, a couple of £100. I think we've got to be very precise about where we want to target and drop these leaflets, not only because there are lots and lots of people around, those specific areas. A couple of times we've looked at properties where I think we shouldn't have, because we knew that we didn't like those areas in terms of too much noise. I know if you're living in a passive house, you're obviously not going to hear much of the surrounding streets, but one thing that I love where I live right now is if I open the front door and my son runs out, I'm not terrified that he's going to be mown down by a car, because it's a dead-end street. And that same idea of being in a quiet neighbourhood, I really, really like and would love to replicate. It's not the be-all and end-all. That is something that I'd like. I know that we've got two airports near to us. We've got Stansted and Luton. So the flight paths, they do these circles, and they tend to change according to the day of the week or whatever. So I'm very aware that there are certain villages that get hit worse than, say, we do, or move over even just a few miles, and it makes a huge difference. So know what you don't want as much as what you do want, and target carefully. I think we know 3 or 4 areas that we'd really, really like to live in, and that last piece of land that we lost, that we got very upset about, I really thought, okay, we're going all out here, we're putting in silly amounts of money, we're going to get this, and then we didn't get it. That would have been a great place to live. More opportunities like that's what I need to find. So the leaflet, the one thing that you've got to be careful with your wording, haven't you? Because you want them to like what you're doing over someone else coming in and getting that. And I guess you're always looking perhaps for people who are quiet, or a family next door. You don't want someone who's going to come and completely make a noise or a mess or whatever it might be. I always think I like people who like gardening because it tends to just bring the whole area up. I don't know whether that's something you agree with, but things like that. Just think about the wording. Don't have too many words. We've put a picture of our family on this flyer as well, just to attract attention. And I'll let you know if we have any progress. I do remember, this is a slight aside, but Lilac, which is a co-housing scheme up in Leeds, when they were looking for land for their scheme, they had about 5 or 6 different places that they could go to, and they went to one, and the local community almost begged them to buy this land. It's because they could see that their intentions were just to make this a better place, to do something really good, and you can just tell, you go up there and they're lovely and friendly. So yeah, let's move on to number 3. Now this is closely connected, but it's also taking it into your hands to advertise. You've got your leaflet, well, make it work for you now. Think where you can use that copy. You maybe have to adapt it a little bit, but can you advertise in the local paper? Yeah, I know you don't read it, but people still do. And what's interesting is it's often the elderly population who actually have the big gardens or the houses that haven't been altered at all in 20, 30 years. So I definitely think the paper, you shouldn't rule out that one. Put in an advert there. Some other ones that I've been thinking of in terms of the post office sometimes has this TV screen, or maybe you have it at a garage, and they don't actually charge that much. I think the one that I saw was about £10 a month, where I don't know how many times it would go around in that, but that could have your message on for a very, very small amount of money. And it's all about unearthing these leads. Notice boards in villages. Again, you never know who you might bump into, even just trying to put it up on a notice board. I think that these are all opportunities worth going to try. And again, as we move on to number 4, which is contact big landowners in your region. And you will have some. For example, I'll tell you about 2 that I know about where I am. We have a big brewery called McMullen's, and this is actually one that I have done. Okay, it didn't go anywhere. But again, we're just trying the maximum number of places that we possibly can. We've got another, I think, often social housing based group, but also holds a lot of land, and the family that hold the land are still in the area. I haven't managed to have much success with that one. But have a look around, because probably the connectors where you live will know about these people, and it's worth giving it a go. And then number 5, this is a bigger one. So far we've had spread the word, we've had the leaflet drops, we've had advertise locally, contact the big landowners, and I've left the biggest one till last, the scariest one, which is creating the opportunity yourself, becoming a detective. I imagine if you spent a lot of time on Rightmove that you could be good at this already, because you're always looking at the picture and thinking, what can I do here? Is that building as run down as it needs to be to actually replace it, or da-da-da-da-da? And so I feel that you may know about some of these opportunities already. I'll tell you about a couple in my area. For example, one street over, there are about maybe 10 garages, very unsightly. I don't think many of them are even used. And I just look at that frequently and think, what's it going to take to develop this? Again, you don't know how many people are looking with the same intentions. And I have done a little bit of research into this. I haven't gone to the land registry, which I think would be the next step. It doesn't cost you much money to dig out who is the owner of this. The trouble, I imagine, I think this is a block in my mind that has stopped me from even going down this route, is that these garages won't just have one owner, they will have multiple owners. And that scares me a bit. But I think that this could be a podcast that I could do just to see how far down the line I could go. And there's actually a little bit further down the road, another small opportunity of a few garages. Down the street, if I was wanting to live on the main road, I look at one property, there's property, house, and then there's a house, and the garden to the left of the house just looks out of proportion and big compared to the others on the street. And I'd be very interested to know, in fact I should probably go and knock on the door, just being nosy, whether they've had people say, are you interested to sell? Because that could be divided very neatly into two. And every so often, depending on where you are again, there are these opportunities to split in two. But do be careful. I think, as we're saying with all of these, you've got to be careful about the planning permission, because if you buy this, at least I suppose if you buy a property and you don't get the planning permission, then you just sell it off and you haven't really lost anything. But certainly if you were going to buy land and you're just buying a field, you don't want to go there. Now, there was one other that I wanted to mention. Oh, yes, and that was thinking about old industrial buildings, particularly where the space isn't that big and there's housing all around, because there's an area here. It certainly wouldn't be a one-house job, but if you could team together with other people for a co-housing project or even a bigger self-build, we've talked about this on the podcast before, that I would love to be able to have the resources to try and say, right, let's just buy up this huge, great piece of land and then split it up so that we can get self-builders. Maybe we could even just build one unit full of flats or whatever, but just take the control into our hands, because we're bound to build something better than the volume house builders. And I think that pretty much gets me to the end of my list. So a quick recap of those ways to get proactive: spread the word, friends and family, social media, seek out the connectors, the leaflet drops. It's not going to cost you much. You're again just looking for that lead, that one lead. It's all you need. One person, one elderly couple who the garden is too much to tend, and you are just doing them a massive favour. Plus they get some money as well, and hopefully it doesn't even go onto the market. You can pay a fair price, but you steer clear of the estate agents. Advertise locally was number 3. 4, contact the big landowners. And I do know of one situation actually in my local town where he bought a piece of land off the brewery. You'd even wonder how the brewery had this piece of land. It was a triangle and little wooded scrubland area. So that can work. And finally, creating the opportunity, identifying the plots, whether it's getting on Google Earth, that will save you the walk. But I think the walk is the best way. And certainly don't be afraid to have a chat to anyone along that. Knock on some doors. We haven't mentioned that. So there are definitely a couple of podcast episodes out of this. I've mentioned all of this today because I've implemented some of these things, but not all of them. And I think the one that I'd really like to do would be to just try and see if I can get any further down the line with identifying my own plots. Because my wife always says, all that's going to happen is you're going to give them the idea and then they're going to say, this is good, let's give it to an estate agent, and then it'll go to sealed bids and you'll lose out again, which may happen, but we need to try it to see what could happen. The other episode that I'm going to promise you is that one on auctions, that hopefully if I can get hold of an auction house, maybe just to trail the person with the auction book in front of them and the hammer and the auctioneer in technical terms, and see how that whole process goes. Take a look at the show notes today, houseplanninghelp.com/127, where you can review everything that we've talked about. Perhaps there's something else you've tried. Maybe you're further down the line, you've got your land, and you're saying, Ben, you haven't tried this. We're always open to more ideas. And this, again, we just adapt everything we've got. We can add things in. So please leave a comment in the show notes if there's something you've tried that has worked. And if you found that useful, then what you might find is a more complete picture in our Finding Land course that we've put together that takes you right through it. I think it goes through all the different plot types that you could be looking for, and details a bit more about planning permission too, takes you through all of the websites that will be useful for plot hunting, and then some of the things that we've talked about today, but just makes it nice and easy all in one course. houseplanninghelp.com/land. Finishing up today on a hub update, because we've got new material in there now. Our module on sweat equity is there. This is the idea that you're probably going to have some skills to bring to the table, whether it's just decorating, doing some painting afterwards, which may not actually be as easy as you think it is, right up to doing the electrics, doing the plumbing, whatever skill. It's a self-build. You might be doing the whole thing yourself. There's a balance somewhere, isn't there, in terms of you've got to put time into this. So can you earn more money elsewhere to pay people? That's what we're looking at in this sweat equity module. I think it's a really interesting one. And at Long Barrow, they are laying down the first floor. So you can watch that video, see it progress. And what's interesting is Alex's reaction, because of course now the basement is not complete, but it feels more like a room, and he can see some of it come together. So I think it's quite an interesting one. We have 16 hub members now. As I mentioned, this is a long-term project, so I'm very excited because 16 is also a good number to try and get feedback about what's working and what's not working so that we can improve our resource as we go along. What I'm hoping to do, because this is often difficult to communicate to you, is to include a video walk around of what is in the hub so you can see what you're getting before you get it, because I imagine that's a difficult thing. But if you would like to sign up, then it's houseplanninghelp.com/join. houseplanninghelp.com/join. It's £99 for the year. As the price has gone up, we've also introduced a new feature, which is a quarterly progress call. And this will be, it's a bit like a podcast or a live conference call, just for the community though. And the idea being that we get together. I've decided to set it quarterly to begin with. We can always up that rate if we feel we need to, just to discuss where our projects are going, where we're getting stuck, bringing all of those minds together for anyone that wants any help. And what I enjoy doing is being able to use my network of people that they always seem friendly. I say, can you help me with such and such? And they'll say, yeah, I've got some names here. These people are really reliable. So that's the idea. If I can't help you, then hopefully I know someone who can, or someone else in the group can help you. Perhaps they're ahead of you in the project. That's the idea of these quarterly progress calls. Once again, £99 for the year. houseplanninghelp.com/join. Well, I hope you enjoyed a slightly different one today. We'll be back to interview format next time. The House Planning Help podcast is produced by Regen Media, content that matters.